probably every stable star system has planets around it they're discovering, and there's the likelihood that there's an enormous diversity of life out there is a statistical certainty. Even the conventional astronomers and the Drake formula will support that. The question is, have they gotten here? Well, most probably wouldn't be able to, just like we weren't for thousands and thousands of years. But there's such hubris to think that, we're at the pinnacle of technology on Earth in 2013. We're not. I think that when you begin to look at the progression of technology, once you reach a breakout point, as we have in the last century here, in fact, most of the big breakthroughs in technologies no one knows about. They exist, but they're in a classified project. And that's, I think, as big or a bigger story than the ET story, is the fact that there is a cabal of, as I said, sociopathic, misanthropic folks who have decided their macroeconomic grip on power needs to be maintained through this sort of ruthless secrecy, and where they keep from the public this information, not because they think people are going to hurl themselves off the Brooklyn Bridge because we're not alone in the universe, but because when this comes out and this information comes out, it means that the sciences already exist so that we can get off oil and gas and coal. And you know what? A Goldman Sachs guy said that's a $600 trillion nut you're cracking right there. Trillion. And because if you look at all the oil in the ground, the coal in the ground, the commodities trading, the petrodollar system, the utilities, the internal combustion engines, all of that is defunct, extinct stuff, or should be. And so here we are cannibalizing this planet for no good reason except that there's a handful of folks. And you look at the sort of centralization of wealth and power there is in the world now. It's the most extreme it's ever been in human history right now, right this minute, this instant. So, there's 200 to 300 individuals and corporations that have over half the net worth of the world.
The evidence that this technology has been suppressed, is there evidence that like this free energy technology has been?
Yes, there's a huge amount of evidence. And
do you reveal this in this documentary?
Yes, there's a whole document trail. And one of the things we got some years ago was a demand from the Department of Defense to the FBI that they turn over the secret papers of Nikola Tesla that were stolen. And we have this document. And what happened to them and what were they trying to hide? The Federation of American Scientists, a very big mainstream organization in Washington that has a national security research project associated with the Federation of American Scientists, came out about 2 years ago with a report that there were 5,135 patents that have been seized under the National Security Act, and that some of these things were energy related. One of them, in 1971, was only a solar photovoltaic generator. We're from sunlight to electricity, photovoltaic. That was more than 20% efficient. Now, you can't even get that now, but meaning that it was probably like 40, 50%, turning sunlight directly into electricity. Mm-hmm. And it had a national security order slapped on it. And this mainstream scientific group says, how could that be a threat to national security? It would have been a threat to the domination of oil and coal and the petrodollar system. So, this is not a conspiracy theory. Mm-hmm. There are entities that have conspired. And you look at the wealth and power behind these entities. I mean, people have been killed for a lot less than this.
It really is. That is such a loaded word, that conspiracy. It's unfortunate that it's necessary to use because it's been so co-opted.
If the people allow it to happen, and I was just reading an article in the New Republic about this, that if you, whether you're letting Saddam Hussein or the Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi or whatever it is, or you have to give them that power. We give the power to the government ultimately by our passivity. And so ultimately, I'm not one of these people who runs around saying, oh, well, there are these boogeymen that are doing everything and we're just hapless creatures. If we're allowing it, if we're not part of the solution, we're part of the problem. If we're allowing it by our inaction and passivity, because we want to be bread and circus people sitting around eating, Cheetos and watching Jay Leno, which is fine. But if that's all we're doing and we're not trying to fix this problem, then, obviously the passivity of the public and our politicians who don't want to risk their career or danger, in that power vacuum, you're going to have these sort of people step. And I think there's a power vacuum that existed for a little while after World War II that gave an entry to these folks. And I think that it will continue for as long as we let them do it.
I think it's pretty obvious when you look at the fact that this is the age of information, where information is being distributed more freely and more easily than ever before.
Right.
Yet this is also the age where the government is continuing to attack the Bill of Rights, continuing to slowly but surely restrict our rights and civil liberties, and make it so that if they deem you a threat to the nation in any way, shape, or form, they can essentially detain you. They don't have to do anything legal. They don't have to contact your family. This is all stuff that's being passed now, and that seems to me to point to the fact that they're looking at this. Where's it going? If you look at it on a graph, if you look at it, if you project the future, well, it's going towards some ultimate free information space, and if it gets to that, then it's going to be revealed exactly how much fuckery's been going on for all these decades and how much craziness has been going on behind the scenes. And it's going to come to a point in time where the government's going to have to be accountable for where all the money goes every year in tax dollars. And right now they're not. You give them your tax dollars, you don't get a receipt, you don't know what the fuck happens. There's a congressional budget meetings, and the Senate, gets together, and the president puts out his plan, and the financial people get involved. But how much access do we actually have as to where your Dr. Stephen Greer's financial records or your tax dollars go? Almost nothing.
Oh, we don't know. And even the folks who I know an auditor for the federal government who audits Northrop Grumman, and he said one of the problems is that once you get to a compartmented project that's eyes only and it's unacknowledged, they're not going to tell you anything. They won't even acknowledge it exists. So how is there any check and balance on that?
It's essentially a dictatorship.
Yeah.
When it gets to that, really, you're essentially dealing with a dictatorship. It's just dressed up as a democracy, but their ability to act is completely. They have total impunity. They can do whatever the fuck they want. They don't have to listen to you.
If we let them.
And
here's the other problem with that. Is that the macroeconomic system. We're supposed to be a free market economy. Well, how free can the market be if there have been decades of confiscation and suppression of these advanced transdimensional energy devices and these so-called over-unity free energy devices? And if that's going on, it completely lays to waste the whole concept of a free market. So yeah, it's a free market if you want to tinker around the edges and come out with an iPhone 5 instead of an iPhone 4 or whatever version of this and that.
Right.
But let's not forget that your computer that you think is so cool, you're charging it off a grid that's a 1800s coal-fired power grid for the most part. And so we really have to wake up to the fact that our society has been held back, retarded, really seriously by this kind of secrecy. And so this secrecy is actually becoming a threat to our continued, not just our liberty, but it's an existential threat to the planet. And moreover, it keeps forcing all these unintended consequences where we stay encamped in the Middle East. And the buzzword in Washington, because of our vital national security interests. Well,
right.
That's code for oil. Just forget the BS. That means oil. Because you say, well, what about Israel? Israel has 200 or 300 nuclear weapons. And I lived there for 3 years. Believe me when I tell you, they can take care of this. I mean, if there's an existential threat to Israel, they can handle it. They don't need Big Brother America there.
But don't they? I mean, don't they get a tremendous amount of funding from us and weapons?
Oh, they get funding, but I'm just saying we don't. That's not the reason we're in all those vast areas of the Middle East. It's because of the oil interests,
of course. Yeah.
And this becomes a question of why. Well, because if you have a device that would fit on the table here, that run your house, where you don't have to be on the grid, or your car, put in the boot of your car, and you have an enormous amount of power, electric.
How would that work?
Those are called zero-point or quantum vacuum electromagnetic generators. And basically, through very high voltage systems, you create a vector into this baseline energy field that it really holds the universe together. And, they started talking about the Higgs field and the negative energy of the matter of the universe. But for years, it's been proven that this zero-point energy field exists through what's called the Casimir effect. And I'll get into the arcana of the physics of it. But this is published in mainstream journals. The question is, how do you tap it? And can you? And the answer is yes, and it has been. But they keep suppressing scientists and inventors who come up with it. There's a man that I know who worked at Lawrence Berkeley Labs, and he was using a coiled array around a barium titanate crystal and using very high voltages with a certain hertz, certain pulses, he was able to get 10 times more energy out than was going in because the crystalline structure was tapping into this zero-point energy field that is in the fabric of space and time. So there's an enormous amount of power. It's been estimated that every cubic centimeter of space, not outer space, but space in this room, has enough energy to run the Earth for a day if you could tap it. So the question becomes, if you can do that, you're not going to need to have your car filled up at a gas station or a utility to Con Ed or whoever it is. And those sort of interests have trumped the technical ones. The technological issues, I believe, can be fixed. It's the strategic issue that's the problem.
I'm going to stop you because I need to know about this experiment. Where was this taking place? Is this peer-reviewed? Is this something that has been...
It was confiscated. The man that had this happen is a physicist.
Mm-hmm.
And some goons broke into his lab, broke it up at the experiment, and then basically took him and put him in a mental hospital for a while.
Where did this happen?
Lawrence Berkeley Labs in the 80s.
Okay, so
70s or 80s.
Do we know exactly what he did, and is it reproducible?
Yeah, I think it is.
So why has no one reproduced this? It doesn't make any sense.
Because you have to have a whole lot of specialized equipment to do it right, and people have tried. Here's getting to the reason we're doing this film is that 100% of the proceeds from it are going to go into build a new energy lab. So all this stuff that we've collected can be done. I think with the intelligence we've gathered in between 1 and 2 years, we will come out with at least a generation 1.0 of these energy systems, because I have thousands of pages of documents on this and many, many physicists who've worked in these programs. But you've got to have a properly equipped lab. You've got to have security. You've got to have the whole world watching. And this would not be a secret project like the Skunk Works at Lockheed. This would be, it'd be like this. It'd be streamed. So all the work going on in that lab, the whole world's watching.
Okay, so...
All right, because I don't think you can do this secretively.
How come you know about this story? How come you know about this experiment tapping into zero-point energy, but this is not common knowledge amongst nuclear physicists? This is not something that's discussed in the mainstream news. This is not something that you can find information online on any credible source. No one has... It seems to me that if there was an experiment that tapped into such an unbelievably unlimited supply of energy like that, it would be impossible to keep this under wraps, that you would be able to keep the conversation under wraps.
No, it's not true. And in fact, if you go to the website, SeriousDisclosure.com, there's a portal there to the energy research, and there are thousands of documents and pages of stuff, things that were reported in the media, and then they got confiscated and shut down. But you're asking this question as if academia and the media are operating freely, not under these suppressive behaviors. And I think...
Well, I'm asking the question, actually, because just the nature of human curiosity and incredibly brilliant, intelligent men that are out there that study energy... I would think that someone would look into this and examine it.
Okay, well, there is. And in fact, one of the people that were funding for a while, before he got threatened by a former CIA director who went down to his SCIF, his Secure Communication Intelligence Facility, was an understudy of William S. Bender at the University of Washington.
And he got threatened, and what they say to him?
In 1974, I think it was 74, he formed a company, and he's one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. And he had developed these transdimensional systems using electromagnetic energy. And some guys came in with a national security order, told him that they were confiscating his equipment, his device, his notes. They were all going into the vault.
Right. And
this man, who I know very well, who stayed at my home, and still works for under contract with CIA and various groups, he said that basically the intelligence community owns his soul, and that he can only do only so much to provide information and bring this out. And people who think that doesn't happen are living in a very naive world.
This is 40 years ago, though. You're talking about.
And it would happen.
70 what?
No, that was 40 years ago when the thing he started. Then after I developed a relationship with him, he checked with his intelligence, what they call his shepherds, his handlers in the intelligence community. They said, yes, you can work with Dr. Greer not on the propulsion stuff that flies around like a UFO, but just on the energy generation part of this. And so we provided a grant to him through my project, the Orion Project.
So the government limits his ability to do research on specific topics?
Well, he actually is on the payroll of the government now, because he was basically told it's this or you have no career at all. And if he had disclosed what he had invented in 1974 under the national security order he was hit with, he would have been imprisoned